let's move past debating how long this is going to take. What's a Bitcoin future look like to you?
Future in what time frame?
Just past Bitcoinization, a Bitcoin future, a Bitcoin-based future.
Okay. Well, my guess is that you watch the systems grow in parallel. The governments will attempt to impose constraints, and Bitcoin will grow to a size where it won't be able to enforce those constraints. There's some size at which market participants will pretty much do what they want, and there'll be so many participants, the desire for Bitcoin will be so high, and the tools and techniques to work around those constraints will be such that people will simply do what they want to do. People already do what they want to do. Anybody who takes drugs? They do what they want to do. There are lots of things that people do, and they do it anyway, regardless of what they're permitted to do. And they find ways to do these things. So eventually Bitcoin will grow large enough, and the process will just evolve naturally. People will just step into the next system. People will start operating in the system, at some point. Interesting thing about Bitcoin is, and I think what Max was driving at, but I'll state it a little bit differently. We see this with mining. Mining is maybe the most perfect competition that humans have ever seen. In economics, they teach you in basic economics class. That first class I took, I think it was macro, was 1B, and they teach you about perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopolistic competition, all the different types of competition that you could have. And I don't really remember, this is a long time ago that I took these classes. We don't see perfect competition existing anywhere. And the nature of Bitcoin mining is pretty close to perfect competition, even though you have some larger miners. Because there really isn't a way to earn a return on your Bitcoin, I don't believe we're going to have a world that has credit or debt in a Bitcoin-only world. I think that this will go away. I think debt and credit will be destroyed by Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's inherent nature is deflationary. I like to give the example that if I had a business, and I'm going to paint an extreme example just for the point of illustration. If I had a business and I borrowed, I was doing $1 million in sales. In the first year, I borrow $1 million, and my margin is 10%. I make $100,000 in year one. In year 10, it grows to a $10 million a year revenue business, still have a 10% margin. My debt was $1 million. I earn $1 million in income. I can pay off that debt pretty easily. In a deflationary world, in a Bitcoin world, in year one, I have a business. I borrow 100 Bitcoin. I'm earning 100 Bitcoin in value. I have a 10% margin. I'm earning 10 Bitcoin. In year 10, I'm earning 10 Bitcoin because its value has gone up tremendously in buying power, not just against dollars, but in buying power. I can buy much, much more with my Bitcoin. I earn a 10% margin. That's 1 Bitcoin. I can't pay off that debt. It's 100 Bitcoin that I owe. I don't have it. I'm only earning 1 Bitcoin a year. I think that its deflationary nature is highly destructive to debt and lending. I think debt and lending and credit exist in a world that we're in because those were technological solutions that had to be met. I think you'll have a world which is only a world of equity and a world of money. I think the whole nature of a yield curve is a legacy view of the world. I don't think it will exist. I think that you might find trust minimized ways of lending. See, to my way of looking at things, flood is in some ways not really lending. You're kind of renting out your use of Bitcoin. So you're renting it to somebody for a fee. That kind of is what capital, working capital ought to be. You're kind of renting it. But it's been done in a trust minimized way. The more ways we can figure out to lend in a trust minimized way, those will grow. And so you will have a natural, it will be a very different kind of lending than currently exists. The way if I were to broadly define the legacy fiat world against the Bitcoin world, I think their foundations are different. To me, fiat legacy is founded fundamentally on the concept of a promise. I promise to pay you. That is the entire nature of the foundation of the legacy system. Bitcoin is founded on the idea of trust minimization. That's a very, very different structure. And I think they lead to very different types of consequences. I heard George Gammon comment, I've heard Raoul Pal comment. They think that you have to have things operate in a certain way, and you can start this way, and it will inevitably lead to that. And I think that there are examples that they might like to use. I've heard George Gammon say this. He uses free banking. I think that we didn't have technological solutions that were available in free banking with gold, in the legacy system with currency, non-backed currency. We simply don't have the technology to deal with certain things. And I think that the constraints of Bitcoin, a trust minimized deflationary money, will set up its own restrictions that will prevent things from happening a certain way. George Gammon was commenting with Peter McCormick and saying that, well, if you had some form of catastrophe or war, then you could force lending. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's not actually going to happen. You could try, but I don't think that people will accept that money, that you won't be able to have more Bitcoin. I think the answer will be a different answer. I think you will see evolve maybe insurance companies to deal with some of these issues where you're prepaying for your risk. I think it'll look like different structures. I think we'll see different structures evolve. I'm very much a non-believer in the idea that the world has to continue to exist the way it has. I don't notice a lot of horse and buggy carriage repair shops when I drive around. I go to gas stations. The world changed. Sure. We don't, I don't need a watering station for my horse. I don't need a place with my horse. Go get some hay to refuel. The world's changed. It's a different world. Different technologies will bring about different things. And I think that, that's a silly kind of example, but I think you can, if you think about it, you'll figure out a lot of examples like that. The world.
Yeah, I think that brings up a lot of great stuff to comment on. I definitely want to hear Max's thoughts on all of this. Cory, you want to chime in first, and then I want to hear Max's comments also on the idea of how Bitcoin will change the way our economy works, the way our society works, and just the future in general. Take that as far as you want, focus it on just the economy part of it, go to the social level, wherever you want to go.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, so we've got a commenter in the YouTube chat today. So hi, Addison, thanks for joining. A lot of questions about, what happens in a Bitcoinized world, and will it create, some other problems, and which problems will it solve and which will it not solve? So we can absolutely talk about the problems that Bitcoin is likely to solve. And we can also, sort of play it out as best we can rationally and try to think about some of the other issues that it will create. One thing we cannot do is say that leaving a system that is significantly worse in all respects, the base money is just completely broken in a fiat system. This experiment has failed. Leaving that alone, just because the much better money, a money that's 10 times better, 100 times better, 1,000 times better, 1,000,000 times better, and not doing that because you're worried about some of the problems that better money might create, or opportunities that it might create. Because when you have a problem, you have an opportunity to go and create something to make that better. You don't do that. That's not how we advance as people. That's not how businesses make decisions. It's not how societies make decisions. It's immoral to leave the crappy thing in place just because you're worried that the better thing might have a few negative side effects. So that's kind of the, from first principles, you replace the crappy thing with the much, much better thing, no matter what. Then you think about, okay, what are some of the amazing benefits of Bitcoin? And, there's been a lot of back and forth, and some people attempting to do some educating and pointing toward great resources in the chat, like Stefan Livera's podcast and Safety's book, et cetera. I would say probably the most interesting thing, and both of these guys have talked about it plenty, is when you remove friction by having everyone essentially using the base money and being able to, in the not so distant future, exchange any good and service globally for Bitcoin, for slivers of a Bitcoin, for sats, and probably in the future subsats or whatever they end up getting called. You remove all that friction, it basically increases the opportunity for people to work with each other, to cooperate, to pay for goods and services without that tax of switching back and forth between currencies, without the friction of having to wait for the legacy financial system to be sending that value around the world. So I'll just be, I mean, we already do this. Some of us are kind of living in the future that everyone will live in the not too distant future, which is just being able to contract with anyone for any good or service anywhere in the world at any time. And the amount of economic activity that unleashes will lift all of us. And we will, in my view, if sort of the steady state productivity growth under sound money was probably like 2% globally, and then it stagnated a bit, and let's say it's gone down to 1.5 or something in the fiat experiment, I think under a money that's much better than gold and has all of the properties and capabilities of Bitcoin, is widely used by billions of people around the world as a store of value, a medium of exchange, unit of account, you're actually going to see global productivity at a steady state. Like average global productivity could be 5%, could be 10%. We don't know. It could be much, much, much bigger and better. It's going to unleash a pure form of capitalism and cooperation, the likes of which we've never before seen on this planet. It'll be like the Belle Epoque times 1,000. So that's what I'm really interested in. Yes, sure, there will be some people left behind, but I think we're going to have plenty of excess capacity, plenty of money, plenty of resources, plenty of new technologies to absolutely be able to take care of people if, in a charitable way.
Max, Bitcoin future, there's a lot there you can play with, man. There's a lot there. You can go in whatever direction you want. Addison wants to know what's the Bitcoin future.
Well, what stops people from doing what they want to do? And it all comes down to fear. Most people are riddled with fear. And fiat money compounds the problem because it creates a situation where, let's say in this country, if suddenly you're absent fiat money, you can become homeless. If you have to go to the hospital and you need some medical attention, the way it's set up now is that you could become bankrupt, and something like hundreds of thousands of Americans went medically bankrupt in the last couple of years, and that's fear, and that tool of fear is used to subjugate. It's used to propagandize. It's controlled centrally by the worst amongst us who have fiat-based power. Now, with Bitcoin in the mix, what happens when you take that fear away? And when you take the fear away, that vacuum inside of you is replaced by love. It's replaced by faith. And if you take the average person and you take away all their fear and you replace it with love or replace it with faith, that person is a different person. That person is doing something they're doing it fearlessly, with compassion, with and that makes all the difference. So, and that can happen pretty quickly. When enough people lose their fear in this country and the world around us, because the fiat money fear barons have been put out of business by Bitcoin, that's it. We have a spiritual awakening where the fear is gone. And once fear is gone, you're at peace. And with peace, you can do something or not do something. But doesn't matter if you do it or not do it. And that's something that I think we will experience in our immediate futures. And that's something that we see very, very, very rarely. It's hinted at through certain religious tracts, religious concepts, you know, the hints at this idea that doesn't nail it, doesn't solve for it. We see it through artistic endeavors, you know, when we're moved by a work of art, for example, that's fear leaving our body. When we see a work of art that's fantastic and it moves us emotionally, that's the fear is leaving us and it's replaced with this faith. And we have a spiritual experience, we have an emotional experience. And but it's so we kind of know it's there, but it's like a ghost. The ghost of of actualization, the ghost of ideation is here, but we can only glimpse it through a peripheral vision, through our maybe our sixth sense, right? It's hinted at through the artists and the poets. With Bitcoin, it becomes realized. It becomes who we are, and our journey, many long years, hundreds of thousands of year journey of fear and hate comes to an end. And we may be the generation that experiences it. So on one hand, the Gen Z and the millennials, they got the raw end of the stick because the boomers stole everything. But on the other hand, as the boomers die off, it could be the millennials and the Gen Z that experience this rapture. So that could be interesting to see. I hope I'm around to see the full flowering of this.
People will think that you sound crazy who are new to Bitcoin talking like this, Max. So how is it exactly that a simple thing like money could have such a drastic change on individuals and then therefore society?
Right. Well, you have to go back to the history of money, you know, and that's of course the part of the Bitcoin rabbit hole is people end up having that part of the experience. And you know, it's Bitcoin is technology, it's money, and it's sociology, and it's psychology, and it's game theory, and all these different things. And we have a lot of people in the space that speak on these things, and more every day who approach it from the even a Michael Saylor is at heart an engineer. You know, when he talks about Bitcoin, he's talking about it as a world-class engineer, electrical engineer talks about it. And he's already at the incredibly high level. And then you put Bitcoin into the mix, and what comes out of his mouth is stunning, right? It's, oh my God, it's like incredible. So going back to the history of money, it's the beginning of our experience here on this planet has always been characterized by a need to assemble, to communicate, to use some kind of communication, and to travel and to move and to take in the world through our senses. I mean, we have these brilliant senses, the eyes and ears and taste, and why do we have all these senses? To take in so much of the world, to take in so much sensory information in such a powerful way, and the mind that's still unknown territory, that it's going at a hash rate of about 1 billion hashes per second, the human mind, and it's just assimilating all this, and there's trillions of synapses, and it's just this organism that's taking in the minuscule and the cosmic at the same time and making sense of it, or not making sense of it. But we have these communities, and at the core of all these communities is communication. And at the core of this communication also is this wanderlust of the world around us, which means we're traveling, we're moving, and that always involves trade. That always involves trade. That always involves the ability to exchange something of value with somebody else. And what happened over time is that what humans noticed is that if I can exchange for something for value that holds its value, then it helps me take in my senses. It helps me move around, helps me travel in the world. It helps my wanderlust. It helps my sensory insatiable need of my senses to take everything in. If I have something of value that keeps its value. So we had many experimentations. We had beads, we had shells, we had, gold, of course, played this role for thousands of years. Gold takes value into the future. I can take my gold anywhere in the world. Somebody will accept it in exchange. Even though it's not recognized formally as a medium of exchange by any government, people will nevertheless take my gold. I can go anywhere in the world. It has exchange value, and that exchange value has been consistent for thousands of years. So then that brings us to Bitcoin. And it takes everything up a level, because now instead of having relative scarcity, I've got absolute scarcity. It's different than gold in this respect. Gold is relatively scarce, but it's not absolutely scarce. Gold is relatively portable, but it's not absolutely portable. Gold is relatively divisible, but it's not divisible to 100 million places. And a few other things that Bitcoin has that are superior to gold. So then you take that human with that wanderlust that wants to, through their senses, take in all the cosmic reality, all the immediate reality, all the relationships, all the communication. We are a sponge for reality. We love reality. We want more of it. And you put into the mix where I can use this perfect form of absolutely scarce medium of exchange language, money thing. And suddenly, as Shakespeare wrote, the world is your oyster. You can go anywhere at any time. And you've got your Bitcoin world is there at the same time. Wherever you are, you're with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is always with you. You can always exchange. You're always going to be welcome. It's unconfiscatable. Again, something that's not true with gold. Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. So I can go literally anywhere in the world, show up, and I can walk into a room of Bitcoiners and say, I need this, I need this, I need this. They're like, great. This, it's going to cost you X number of Bitcoin. Fine. Now I'm here. Now here I am, and I'm in this new place, and I'm taking, my senses are taking in new things. Our senses are insatiable. Our wanderlust is insatiable. Why? Humans are always going to be pushing the envelope. We're always going to be flying to the moon. We're always going to be crossing the ocean. The early ocean crossings were done by folks who thought the earth was flat and they were going to sail right off the ocean. Did they stop? No. How many people signed up to fly to Mars? Plenty, even though it's a suicide mission. But their heart has an insatiable quest for the new. And it's both our greatest asset and our greatest weakness, because the money sucks. The money, unfortunately, does not equal our ambitions as humans to know everything and to experience everything. With Bitcoin, these two things are finally merged. Perfect money with a human soul. You put those together and you have a new evolutionary step. It's a quantum evolutionary step. We're going to be a different species very soon, because the legacy system and the inadequacies of this system that we've had now a 200,000 year experiment with will change. It'll be a quantum change. It'll be a step change. And of course, change is something most people don't want to experience. People are resistant to change, even with that wanderlust. People, if you look at the vast majority of people, they're mired in fear. They're mired in hatred. Because they are the victims of the fiat money paper pushers and the paper barons. And they live in hovels. They live in a prison of paper money. And they dream of escaping. And again, I say it, Bitcoin is a vector. It's a vector out. Michael Saylor's on that vector. He has a dream to be richer than Jeff Bezos. I believe he will be. That dream will be realized. You have lots of different people with lots of different dreams, like Robert Breedlove. When I listen to him talk, I mean, he's got a dream about, I think it's very spiritual in nature, what he talks about. I think he can do this fearlessly. There's no reason why that, whatever his vision is, can't be realized. All dreams can be realized. And think about that. All dreams can be realized if the money doesn't support the fear mongers. If the fear goes out of business and love takes over, there's nothing that can't happen. And we as our natures are not horrid. We're not the horrid people that we pretend to be. We're actually greater than that. The problem has been the money. And with the money going back 200,000 years is a form of monetizing our sensual wanderlust. That's what money's been. And it hasn't really been up to the task until now. Now, this thing up here, there's a path to be opened yet. That is quite expansive. It's like Carl Sagan. Remember that show Cosmos? You know, you could feel with Carl Sagan, he had that wanderlust of the cosmic dimensions of things, and he communicated that very well through television. And he became very well known for this because he touched on something, because people really do have a cosmic lust to know, to take it in, because their minds are extremely advanced, but nobody yet has used that organ to its fullest, in its fullest, in a networked way. A networked way. We've had the occasional super genius, you know, the Da Vinci's, Einstein, and they're like silos in out there, and they super accomplished in their spiritual accomplishment. But imagine applying that to the network, and you've got 1 billion or more people suddenly having that epiphany at the same time, which I think Bitcoin enables. And then you have a different reality, and fear dies off. Fear is like your appendix. It's an organ we don't really need. We don't need fear. It served a purpose 1 million years ago, but it doesn't serve any meaningful purpose. And the people who say it does are the paper money fiat printers, because that's how they maintain their empire of fear, is through bullshit paper money. Now Bitcoin is here to eradicate that.
Who feels inspired to take the baton?
A couple of things. I'll go backwards. A comment on what Max was talking about fear. Somebody had commented that fear is stronger than love, to which I have one counter. That if you're a parent defending your children, you give up your life, not because of fear, but because of love. Love is much stronger than fear. Love is much more powerful than fear. People follow people much stronger because they love them and admire them. That's the wrong face. Come on.
For real, Breck.
People follow others. I had a professor who said that Winston Churchill inspired a nation, moved a whole nation. People didn't fear him. They adulated him. They believed in him. They followed him. Dictators try to move you and inspire you with fear, but that doesn't work. Look, even Adolf Hitler, he attempted to use love to follow him, even though he also used fear as a tool. But love, people are much more strongly moved by feelings of love and admiration than they are pushed by feelings of fear. We're very much moved by those feelings. So I agree with Max. Credit is not a good thing. Credit is incredibly predatory. Credit is predatory at its very nature. People become debt slaves. They can't get off this horrible treadmill. You have lenders who are predatory lenders because they lend you money that they know you can't pay back. They lend it in ways that they know you can't pay back, which enables them to acquire your things. I think we will have some lending in a Bitcoin world for people who are predatory, and people will eventually learn that they don't want to borrow, because borrowing in Bitcoin will cost them their Bitcoin and anything else that they have. And I don't think that will be the nature. But people talk reverently about credit. Credit is horrible. At its very core, credit is fundamentally evil. A mortgage is a death pledge. That's what a mortgage is. Go look it up. Bitcoin works because Bitcoin is pure competition. Unlike the legacy system, if you're very wealthy, you can have rentier returns on things. You can have returns from interest payments. But Bitcoin demands that you either work or invest. You have to work for your Bitcoin. The legacy system, the credit system, is fundamentally different in that regard. You can relatively easily live off of the credit. You have to. The only two ways that you'll be able to earn Bitcoin in a Bitcoin only world is you will have to invest it, or you will have to work for it. Now, there'll be many different means of investing it, and you may hire someone to help you invest it, but it comes from work. There are no easy ways of gaining Bitcoin, and I think in many ways it will be a much better system. It also drives competition. I was saying before about perfect competition. Perfect competition is actually not great for producers, but wonderful for consumers. Consumers very much benefit from more and more competition. It means that producers have to work harder. Companies don't always want to work harder for you. They like to do as little as they can. Companies will regularly look for regulatory protection to protect you from their competitors because they don't want to work quite that hard. We've seen over and over again when there is more competition that comes into a space that you get more for less, or you get better service or better quality for the same amount because people have to deliver more than they would when they can get somebody to just beat you up with regulation. So I don't know if I'll be around for a Bitcoin world. I'm not young. I hope I am. I hope it happens fast. I hope I'm around for Bitcoin on the world, but I think it will be better in many, many ways. And I think people think the way they do about the legacy system because they can't imagine the world could be any different. Money is about pricing the things in the system that we have. It's pricing resources. Money prices everything. And prices are the most important thing in resource allocation. If you think of money as a yardstick, but you're constantly changing the length of that yardstick, how do you get accurate pricing? You can't have accurate pricing. That's the fundamental flaw with a flexible money. People think that you can work miracles with having more money. More money doesn't bring about more resources. It doesn't mean that there's more wood to build buildings. It doesn't mean that there's more cement to pour. It doesn't mean that you've produced more doctors or engineers. Money doesn't change the resources in your economy. If you make more of it, if you have X set of resources in your economy, changing the amount of money that you have doesn't make it 2x. This notion that we have about money is absurd. We think we create it and then there's more stuff available to buy. That's absurd. All you're doing is changing the price, which becomes a form of theft. So there's enormous problems with the existing system. And I don't know if Bitcoin will be perfect. There are a few things in the world are perfect and maybe nothing.
Yep.
And Bitcoin will have its own set of problems, but it will be so much better than the existing system.
This holiday season, give the gift of Bitcoin to your loved ones. Swan delivers your Bitcoin gift along with our world-class education and client service. Create a Bitcoin gift and wrap it with a custom message for your family and friends. Dash away with your gift. Your recipient will receive an email right away, that easy. Give the gift of generational wealth. Give Bitcoin.